So thank you very much for joining the show today, Peter.
Hey, it's my pleasure. Thanks for inviting me.
So, most of my listeners are pretty aware due to many repeated rants out of me on what C-18 is, but perhaps if you could run down in a nutshell what that bill is about and where it's been.
Yeah, it's an effort to redistribute advertising income earned by social media and search platforms and search engines to newspapers and other news organizations, qualified ones that have been making the case. Here's the journalistic approach. Have been making the case, shouting very loudly that Facebook et al. Have been stealing their content, and this has been going on for years. They keep saying that. I'm not quite sure why they get away with it, because they never support it with anything other than just a statement. So the non-journalistic or the less journalistic point of view is that it's kind of a shakedown. Actually, it is a shakedown.
It most certainly is. But I guess maybe we'll talk a little more, though. Into I would consider it as a libertarian, more of a devil's advocate point of view. But you've seen the decline of revenue and ability in the media industry. It's been dramatic this last 10 years, and people will call it a problem that needs to be solved, whether or not the government should intervene to do so or not. But our news is at risk. So, C-18 isn't the solution, but what should we be doing?
Yeah, I guess there's a couple arguments there. News is certainly at risk because it's a time of disruption, right? But times of disruption tend to sort the men from the boys in these kinds of things. So the companies that are well equipped intellectually and willing to invest in their product tend to find their ways through these things. Companies that aren't tend to struggle more. It's going to be a struggle for everybody, but some make it and some don't. That's what happens. That's when things evolve, right? When the business models evolve in terms of that. There have been a number of newspapers, the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times is actually starting to do quite well, Daily Telegraph in London, the Times, the Guardian made money last year in London. And, after years of not making it and going with, voluntary subscriptions and voluntary donations, others have gone behind a paywall. You guys are using a paywall. The guys who are going back to that and are providing content that is pleasing to their readers are getting through it. Others are not. And so, and yet at the same time, through the internet, we have access probably to more news than we've ever had before.
Yeah, and I guess that there's what the one of the bigger risks with the government getting in this way, particularly with C-18, is it'll stunt the evolution of outlets. It doesn't give them that incentive then to change or be innovative or try new models. And it also strangles the little ones like us, or the ones that may not qualify, as the government's going to pick and choose who is a qualified outlet and who isn't.
Well, it's actually got worse than that. I hate to break it to you, but this week it appeared like the government was sort of backing down, and it is, because I think Meta, Facebook, and Instagram, unless something dramatic changes, they're gone for good. They're out of the business in Canada, everywhere. They are not news providers. They are content providers. And news is a small percentage. And as they've been saying recently, it's just not worth the grief. There's just not, it's 3% of their content, and those users are replicable. They'll still be there for other reasons, in other words. Yeah, but what they've done is they've changed from a per links, which was really problem, sort of way of charging the social media, the web giants, to sort of putting a cap on it, making a calculation. And then the big problem for guys like you is that they're really restricting the number of people to whom they may have to distribute money. So I still think it's a long shot that any money gets distributed through this. But if it does, here's who it's going to: Videotron, Bell, the CBC, probably the biggest bunch, Rogers, maybe Black Press might be the biggest one that gets out of there. But innovators, startups, entrepreneurs like Western Standard, Blacklock's, Halifax Examiner, Narwhal, they're on the left, they're on the right, they're screwed. They'll be left out. They will not be subsidized. The status quo, right, which includes most of the people who are struggling and a lot of people who have tons of money anyway, like Bell and Rogers, will get the loot, and you guys will not.
we'll have to find other ways. We're pretty stubborn. I don't know if they'll get rid of us that easily.
Well,
but
that's where you need, like you gave a little pitch there. That's where you need your readers' support. Like if and that's really the thing that people are going to have to get their heads around. If they want the sort of content they're looking for, if they want local product, if they want, right now you have the only online newsroom in Alberta, I think, other than the CBC. In terms of doing that, there's no Calgary Herald, no Calgary Sun, no Edmonton Journal, no Edmonton Sun newsroom that I'm aware of. If people want that, it's $10 a month. It's like it's a beer, right?
Well,
and if they're not willing to put that forward, they'll lose.
I try to remind people, at least those of us of a vintage, remember we never thought twice of spending that much or more to have the paper boy bring that to us, to our household every day, and that was decades ago. For that sort of price, you can get the same thing. And I'm hoping Canadian consumers learn to adapt that way. They realize it's a product to pay for, and a lot of our subscribers have so far. It just takes some time.
Yeah, and you don't need to get everybody; you just need to get enough, right? I mean, that's basically the way that needs to go. And I mean, the Globe and Mail has really shuttered down with the paywall and that sort of stuff, and all the other papers I mentioned have done that. But you got to have the quality, you got to have the value proposition, right? So, you guys are doing a good job on that, and others are too. But it's very difficult. I don't like calling names out, but it's very difficult for a post media product these days to make a value proposition. Half of it is half of your local paper is the National Post. So why would you buy your local paper when really, school board doesn't get covered, city council get covered, courts, now and then, right? So what's the point?
No, it's difficult. So, do you think maybe though, the government backed down a little bit, and as you sort of point out, the government really doesn't have the leverage they pretend to have or think they have with the social media giants. It was 3% of the content they provided. I can't see Facebook and Google backing down. People keep saying, well, that happened in Australia, but I think that just says all the more they're not letting that precedent get set, because every country with a greedy government is going to come in and try and snatch some from them in the future. So, do you think the government will swallow some pride maybe and just get this bill, or are they just going to keep on this standoff and no news gets provided on those giants at all?
Sure. Well, first of all, the narrative that Google and Facebook backed down is one spun by Rupert Murdoch's media in Australia. It was actually the government that backed down and made some amendments and said, basically, you're free to make your own deals. And then nobody's actually ever used the Australian legislation. So to that extent, the Australian model is the government threatening to do something unless everybody else does something. I think the government's in the situation right now where I think it's too late for Meta, for Facebook. I think they insulted them too much. People don't make emotional decisions; they make business decisions. But they also found that they were probably going to be insulted whether they made a philanthropic decision and said, "Okay, we'll help anyway." Because let's face it, none of them set out to kill newspapers or to kill news products, right? In terms of that. So what they're trying to do now is salvage some sort of deal with Google, which will put a cap on it. And right now, my understanding is there's a huge difference between what News Media Canada and some of the other lobby groups lobbying for the loot are expecting and what Google's willing to pay. So, the best case scenario, this ends up with them making some kind of deal with Google, who then get exempted from the act, and then they maybe never even bother bringing the act into force, which allows Facebook, Meta to still carry news, which they might decide to get it, but it might be too late for that. They might decide to get out of the business anyway. As it stands, they don't get any deal with Google, and as it stands, they're not going to get one, near as I can tell. And we play this drama out through the fall, and then we'll see what probably the best case scenario for everybody is that the government amends Bill C-18 so that the coming into force date just gets extended into eternity. And you just they don't withdraw the act, it sits there, but no harm is done.
Yeah, you just kind of let it die quietly of old age.
Yep.
Something that's got to be frustrating, and it's been I wrote on it recently, a difficult environment for established journalists, they put in their time and everything, and then there just isn't the demand for their product as there used to be. But I mean, I see it as almost some of the outlets are really jumping on the government bandwagon. I think Post Media said they're going to stop advertising on Facebook, and the shots go back and forth. But it feels it's just sad to see such large institutions getting down to that rather than seeking changes in their ways to try and get out of the soup they're in.
Yeah, it is. It is. It's really it's kind of embarrassing, isn't it? Right? Like, I mean, it's kind of nationally embarrassing to see that we're going through this with our media. I mean, we used to be pretty proud of our media and that sort of stuff, and a lot of it just isn't very good anymore. And nobody. I can't believe I just said that out loud, but people need to say that out loud a little bit from time to time, right? Like, you actually have to have, like I was saying, a product that people want to buy. And here's one of the tough things for the journalists. Like, hey, look, they got kids, they got mortgages, they've got livelihoods, they've got elderly parents to care for, they've got all those things that everybody else does. So it's not like, we shouldn't empathize with their predicament. And I can understand their despair and their desperation in terms of that. But news, there hasn't ever been a great deal of money in news. The fact of the matter is, those big old newspapers, like the one I used to run, it wasn't just the news that people bought it for, right? It's like, those were the days when if you wanted to rent an apartment, you had to buy the paper. If you wanted to, sell your car, you had to put an ad in the paper. And if you wanted to buy a car, you had to buy the paper. If you wanted to do virtually anything, if you want to find out who had a kid, who had the births, deaths, whose daughter got engaged, who got married, whose grandma died, you had to buy the newspaper. If you wanted to see the comics, the horoscope, that sort of stuff. I mean, I got back in the day when Catherine Ford and Peter Stockland were both writing on the Calgary Herald editorial pages, and everybody thought this was great controversy, and it was fun. And it'd be like, what are they going to say next, and that sort of stuff. The fact of the matter is, though, I got more phone calls when the Canadian Tire flyer wasn't delivered to somebody's door on a Thursday morning than over anything Peter Stockland or Catherine Ford ever said.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's the world has changed so dramatically. I mean, it's good to remind everybody. It was just it was a need. It was an integral pipeline to information that you couldn't go without it. But those
and the internet products that really killed newspapers, it's not so much Facebook. I mean, Facebook didn't start making money until 2012, right? And it was over for newspapers by then, because it was Kijiji and Craigslist that did it, right? Classified advertising was worth 30, in some cases 40% of most North American newspapers' revenue. And these guys gave that stuff away for free, right? And how do you compete with that? All of a sudden, something like a product like the Globe and Mail, if you wanted to rent an apartment, it cost you $80 to put a classified ad in, right? All of us, and these were very high rates, 25 cents a word, I think the Herald was, and that sort of stuff. All of a sudden, somebody's giving that away for free. So if they're chasing anybody for loot, it should be Kijiji and Craigslist.
Yeah, I don't want to give them ideas. But I mean, it is tragic. But I mean, obviously, it's just not going to change anymore. I mean, now that I can pick up my phone and search out a used car or an apartment or a job, it's just not coming back. This is a change in history. What do you think the approach is? I mean, you think the government can quietly let this go to the wayside? Would it almost be better for the rest of us to quiet down and let them sort of pad this thing away?
Well, I actually think, and this is where they should have been years ago. But I mean, we are where we are, so no point Monday morning quarterbacking it. But my former CRTC chair, Conrad von Finkenstein, and I just recently did a paper for the Macdonald-Laurier Institute, the purpose of which was just trying to say what we need is a national news industry policy of some kind, right? It involved, like, our suggestion was that when people subscribe, that subscription becomes 100% tax deductible. Now, the Globe and Mail, picked up on that idea in an editorial the other day, and they suggested 70%. Well, fine, but I mean, what we're trying to do is get a conversation started going. But obviously, the current 15%, that's not going to. There's no incentive in that, getting a 15% tax break on your $120 a year to the, who's going to even bother claiming that in their tax form? But make it 70, make it 100%. It's different, a different type of funding mechanism from the web giants, all kinds of different things. So reforming the role of the CBC, getting them out of the advertising business, that sort of stuff. That's what we need to do. That's a long-winded way of saying what we need to be doing is not subsidizing zombie products from the past that are basically staggering around dead, right? And trying to find out ways to keep them staggering around dead. That's like a subsidy for products that are in palliative care. What you need to be doing is understanding what's going on, the nature of the tech revolution that's happening, which is huge, right? And build a path forward to the future, right? We have this federal government that fancies itself as so progressive, and yet when it comes to economic matters like this through Bill C-11 and C-18, they are paleocons, right? They're trying to preserve the world of 1985 in everything they do. It's crazy.
No, it's not coming back, but I guess we can keep speaking up and keep pushing and keep trying to prosper outside of that. I really appreciate you coming on to lay out, what the issue was. I mean, you've, don't want to date you too much, but you've had experience through a great number of years of journalism, and it's worth applying that. I mean, seeing the evolution and seeing where it's gone to. So as you mentioned, you put content, you take part with the Macdonald-Laurier Institute. Where else can people find your work, Peter?
I write for a number of different publications. I write for Epic Times pretty regularly. The Line, the Hub is the last piece I wrote for the Hub got a lot of carriage in terms of that. I occasionally we write for the Globe and Mail, and now and then Western Standard too. Can pick up my stuff. So watch for it. If people were to follow the Macdonald-Laurier, the easiest thing is to follow the Macdonald-Laurier Institute site or social media feeds, because they pick up just about everything we do and republish it under their brand. So that's probably the easiest way for folks to do it.
Great. Well,
thank you. Other interesting stuff there too, by the way.
Yeah, I was about to say, I've had a number of guests, who've been part of the Macdonald-Laurier Institute. They're a fantastic organization. People should go there, as you said, just to look in general. There's you could lose some hours digging into the content there. It's fantastic.
Yeah.
So, great. Well, I thank you again for your time and sharing with us today, Peter. And hopefully the next time we talk, it'll be a little less bleak outlook.
Yeah. Well, like I said, keep your chin up. I mean, this is a disruptive time. It's a tough time. People will need new ideas. Some will work and some won't. But just keep going forward, and the smart and the able will survive.
We will. We're also this stubborn.
Yes.
All right.
Hey, thanks, Corey.
You can become a Western Standard member for just $10 a month or $99 a year for unlimited access.